I see it's after 4 o'clock, so I'm going to call the May 24th, 2021 Select Board meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Ms. Escobedo,
Present?
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Present.
Mr. Johnson,
Present.
Ms. Ackerman,
Present.
myself, Ms. Bates, present.
And the full Select Board is here, and thank you, everyone. So the consent agenda is relatively short today and reads as follows: minutes to approve for April 26, 2021, and town accountant warrants for May 20th, 2021.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye?
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
Thank you. That's unanimous, and the chair so declares. I think we're ready for the town manager's report.
Hi, good evening, everyone. There was a printed report in the packet. I'll just highlight a few things from there. The first is we did successfully have a vaccination clinic for Concord students, both Concord public school students, 12 to 16, as well as some private school students and their families if needed. Overall, about 500 doses were administered over the 2 days. We did use our structure that we put up at the CCHS parking lot. And by all accounts, it was and that was town only. That was a Concord run clinic. That was not a regional clinic. We did, as I think I mentioned last time, we did talk to the state, and they said doing a Concord only clinic would not diminish our chances to be a part of a regional clinic at some point in time in the future, although I think the further along we get, the more unlikely that is. So just want to commend Health Director Susan Rask, Public Mayor Trish McGann, Tom Judge, Fire Chief Tom Judge, Chief O'Connor. The police and fire departments were heavily involved in getting that done. Also Concord Public Works and many others. Aaron Stevens and Kate Hanley both were there to volunteer. And so a lot of people pitched in to make that happen. It was a really great team effort. So congratulations to all that were part of that. One of the things I want to touch on is, as you know, last week the governor revised his guidance to basically pull the lid back on the mask mandate and the occupancy restrictions, and then signaled that he is going to be ending the state of emergency on June 15th. I think I've used this line quite a bit. I think I said it last week when we were building the airplane on the fly. It occurred to me a year ago that dismantling it was going to be even more complicated. And now we are seeing that in real time. And, you know, I guess the first thing I'm going to do is just to let the board and the community know we understand what the expectations are. I think because we have to comply with the previous guidance, we've been open in terms of open for business and providing full services, but most buildings have not been open to the public, and we are working hard to change that. Part of the issue we have that we know is coming is in-person meetings versus virtual meetings, and unless the legislature acts, as we talked about last week, we will have to be in person. To comply with the social distancing guidelines and the occupancy restrictions that we lived under for a little more than a year, we had to convert some meeting spaces into office spaces. And the townhouse is nearing completion, but is still as of yet offline, and we probably won't be able to have meetings there probably into July. And so I just ask boards and committees to be patient with us. We are, for non-regulatory, non-executive boards and committees, we are asking that we're not going to book meetings out 30 days in advance, more than 30 days in advance. Meeting, if you want to have a meeting in the month of June, you can try and book that, and we can try and find a space to have that. But we're not going to permit it to be that same space for July, August, September, on an ongoing basis. Regulatory and executive committees are a little bit different because most times they are required to meet for timelines and things like that. And so we're going to try to accommodate those groups as much as we can. We want everybody to be able to meet whenever they want. I just want to be clear that we may not have the spaces to do that in the short term. I will also say that there are, you have to have, for a public meeting, you have to have the location posted and noted in the agenda. It doesn't necessarily have to be a public building. And so if people have the opportunity to use rooms that may not be in town buildings, we would certainly try to provide support to have meetings in offsite locations to as much as we possibly could. But, it's the governor's basically given us 2 weeks to unwind about 14 months worth of preparation. And it's just going to take more than 2 weeks to do that. Any question? And then in the meantime, we are working on our new schedules, I say our new schedules, but the schedules that we're going to do as a part of our pilot program to be open. I have all the data in from the departments, and we're just kind of putting that all together. And I would expect either by the end of this week or maybe next week, we'll put forward what we think we're going to do. And I'll circulate that to the board as well. Any questions about any of that? Susan, I guess was first.
Yeah, hi, Stephen, thank you. I just had a question about if committees or groups are meeting off-site, don't the sites have to be accessible?
They do.
Okay.
Yeah, they have to be ADA accessible, or a reasonable, or be able to make a reasonable accommodation. I think really ideally we would have offsite locations that are ADA accessible, so we don't have to make special accommodations. Mm-hmm. But like I said, I think we have there's just a finite amount of spaces that we have, and there's going to be a lot of demand for them. And I just don't want to convey that we'll be able to handle the demand, because we have less space than we normally do. So boards and committees that normally met in buildings, those spaces may not be available because of configuration changes that we have to make.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, Jane?
First of all, I was at the Board of Health meeting when I first heard the discussion of this and went, uh-oh, wow, this is a big reversal very quickly. And imagine the potential chaos of, a reopening. So I commend in advance everybody's cooperation, because that's going to take as much patience, actually probably more, than it did to shut us down. And it occurs to me that one of the habits that many of us have gotten very used to is the functional ease of meetings. When a Zoom meeting can happen in your living room, in your kitchen, in anywhere, in your car, the expectation changes. And I hope that everybody is mindful of, and patient with and kind about the fact that the same level of meeting abilities in terms of timeliness, in terms of scheduling, in terms of conflicts, for instance, when you're dealing with physical space, that changes. So I think we're all going to have to readjust our sites a little bit. And so I appreciate the conversation on this. I do want, now I know we're going to be talking about the actual date of the rescinding and other opportunities. I hope that this is going to go well for everybody in Concord, and that it doesn't become a flood of no masks and then a potential impact, especially as we go into a greater tourist season, which I think the merchants could really, our economic core could really use. So I think this is going to be a open up with intelligence about it.
Yeah, I mean, Jane, I don't know if you're going to ask about masks, but I'll touch on that actually after your question.
Oh, I was just going to ask about.
Matt, excuse me, Terry had her hand up. Terry?
Sorry.
You can go first if you want, Matt. It doesn't.
No, well, go ahead, Terry. Go ahead.
All right. I really appreciate that everybody's working really hard and how difficult it's going to be to do this unwinding that took 14 months to put together. So I was really excited to see in the packet that some of the unwinding is already happening, like at the COA and the summer camp and some other developments. That's awesome. I'm really excited. And also So I'm sure we're going to be talking about the bill going to the legislature in a couple of minutes. And I'm glad that we're doing a pilot to test the opening for customer service. There's one thing that I'm really eager to see happen after a citizen brought it to my attention the other day, and I wrote to you about it, Stephen, but I'm just wondering if the COA can be open and the library can be open and, well, I'm having a meeting with somebody inside tomorrow that was arranged. Would it be possible if somebody, you know, if the weather's hot or rainy or something, would it be possible by appointment for a citizen who needs to do town business to go in and meet with the staff that they need to meet with? And that's probably part of your pilot program, but just want to put some urgency to that one if we can.
I think I've conveyed a sense of urgency on getting to this, and opening one room is the same as opening the whole building. And so we're focusing on really doing, you know, reopening so people can come in and meet even without an appointment. You know, I think it's the one thing I want to say, and really the town departments and town staff really, I don't think have, it's been said, but I think the level of effort that has gone into providing full services to the community throughout the pandemic, even if it hasn't necessarily been in person, has been a Herculean effort. And we know that this is the next level of expectation. And so I think that from a logistical standpoint, opening like one room in a building is the same as opening the whole building. And that's where our focus is. And the COA and library have been kind of front runners because their stuff really has to take place on site versus the other services, the vast majority of which we've successfully done either by the use of drop boxes or virtually. But like I said, I think we're focusing on making sure we can do that. And I think if somebody said, "Hey, can we just meet inside?" I'm sure we can accommodate that. The only thing I want to just remind everybody is the guidance is still in effect until the 29th, and so we're planning ahead and like hope to be ready. And so the only thing is on masks. We've been following the governor's orders basically for the duration of the pandemic. And I think it's our intent to continue to follow the governor's orders. And so we did ask the Board of Health for their input. And I think, Jane, you saw that at the meeting, and they said that we were okay to follow the governor's orders with regards to masks. And so we will not be requiring masks for entry in accordance with the governor's orders. But I certainly will communicate to employees that they are welcome to wear masks if it makes them feel more comfortable. And same thing with people coming in to do business with the town. If they would feel more comfortable with the mask, they should wear one. And people should be smart about their own individual situations. But I don't see extending the mask mandate for town buildings. I quite frankly think it would be too confusing for a lot of people.
Okay, Matt.
I think that for town committees that have an assigned staff person, it'll be relatively straightforward to schedule these rooms. But I think for others that don't have a regular staff person, that they may be confused about how to get a meeting place. And I hope, I guess in the chair's breakfast, you could perhaps address some of this, but that it may be an outbound message to the committees would really help for them, to get scheduled. And then just the second comment is that the logistics of changing from remote to in-person meetings, I think will especially impact someone like myself who's working during the day, elsewhere, and now will need to, move to some place. Right now, I can just switch from one Zoom call to the next. And so I hope we might adjust our meeting times to reflect that, because it would be just, actually, it wouldn't be practical for me to make a 4 p.m. Monday meeting in person. And members of the public, I feel there are certain members of the public that would feel the same way.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that's why if you could participate at a meeting virtually or remotely, but others are in person, but you can still vote and do everything else. That's what I think we're trying to build to have the greatest flexibility on timing. And the only thing I want to say, Matt, is I do think there could be issues with scheduling, even for boards and committees that have staffing. What I'm trying to communicate is we are really short of rooms right now for meetings. And so there may not be availability on the timeline that a particular board and committee wants to have. And so, I guess if it may require, like I said, certain boards and committees to either find a different location or maybe just hold off on the meeting until we can have an available time. And we're going to rectify that as soon as we possibly can. But like I said, we're unwinding, circumstances that were put in place because we were required to do so.
I wasn't familiar with too many groups meeting at the townhouse. I mean, other than ourselves. So I'm confused about how that's impacting, the townhouse renovation itself, making much of an impact on availability of meetings rooms. Are there other things that are impacting it? So
basically, say someone met at a conference room in Church Street that's been converted to office space because of social distancing guidelines. It's going to take a while for the facilities department to undo all of that. And so not having the select board meeting room as an option for...
I get it now. Yeah, you mentioned it in the report. Like, so for example, maybe at Kai's Road, there are 2 meeting rooms that are always potentially available, but maybe they're not now. I'm not sure.
Well, planning board would often meet in the hearing room, for larger hearings, and that's not available for a while.
Sure.
Either, so,
well, those are rare, but yeah.
I mean, if you look at it, it's just a number of meetings and a number of pieces, a number of rooms. I think the demand for one is going to outweigh the availability of the other in the short term. So I just want to preach patience and manage expectations.
Okay.
So sorry, Susan.
Another question?
I just wanted to clarify. So up until June 19th, we're going to keep meeting on Zoom.
June 15th?
June 15th, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we'll figure, it depends on what happens with the legislation. If nothing happens by June 15th, we'll be back meeting in person only with, some remote. One person I think can call in remote.
So if there's no other questions for the town manager, I think we're nicely moving into the next agenda item. So thank you, Susan, for that. We want to talk about some of the ramifications that haven't already come up in terms of the town's response to the governor rescinding the declaration of emergency order. And there has been, and I myself was caught up in this in the conversation last week. Clearly, the governor has been promoting that as of May 29th date, there's certain reopening regulations for most businesses and other activities. But there's also the June 15th date, as we just mentioned, in terms of rescinding the declaration of emergency. And so town meeting and Zoom meetings are covered through June 15th. In terms of, in the case of the town meeting, the town moderator has the final call in terms of how she wants to handle masks at the town meeting. And she did announce at the chair's meeting this last week that she expects to not require people to wear masks while they're seated and at the mics, but she does still expect masks to be worn as people are queuing up to get into the town meeting, which will be held outdoors, of course, on June 13th. So that's an example, and I think Jane used the word, I hope we ease into this transition with intelligence. Some of the regulation in our packet today was a fairly exhaustive list of various regulations that speak to different groups and different situations. If you have a chance to go through all of them, you'll see that there is still guidance in certain settings that do require masks. One of those is congregate senior housing, as an example. And there are also advisories for people who are, and it's already been mentioned, who are need to be concerned about their own health, even if they've been fully vaccinated, and need to make their own decisions about continuing to wear a mask in terms of protection from those people who may still not be there. So there, as you read there are some exceptions to all of the regulations that are listed on those 2 pages that were provided in our packet. But clearly, we also want to talk about the draft letter or at least the concept, not so much the draft letter itself, but the concept. We already of asking for at least a longer transition time in terms of being able to use Zoom, or at least a hybrid of meeting and Zoom beyond the June 15th date. And both the Mass Municipal Association is already working on this. Our legislators are aware of this, as are other legislators at the State House and the governor's office. So we've been told that, this is on their radar screen. However, our legislators recently indicated to us it would be helpful to receive correspondence from us indicating our interest in that, an extension, allowing Zoom meetings for at least some period longer, if not out into the future. So I know that select board members have some additional comments they'd like to make about that. So this would be a good time. And there are other items that I'm sure are on your mind in terms of considerations we need to make. Matt's already mentioned one in terms of changing some of the meeting times. If in fact we are limited to in-person meetings only at a certain point, whether it's June 15th or some further date out. And there are other considerations that I know are already on your mind. So let's use that as the jumping off point for discussion among the select board. How about the comment on the legislation, supporting existing legislation or adding items that we would want to mention to our legislators? Jane?
I heartily support legislation that obviously gives as much flexibility to towns and others within the open meeting law provisions, i.e. we don't want to violate open meeting law, but by the same token, as has been thoroughly discussed here, we're not all ready to open doors and go forward. People's lives and schedules have been massively changed. And in fairness, I mean, and I'll say this as a departing select board member, but also as a environmental and energy professional, there have been a lot of really great benefits to using Zoom and to doing remote meetings. You can never replace the public, which we know. I mean, and face-to-face meetings are, I think we're all probably well overdue. I know I need to start practicing because I haven't done it in so long that it's a little nerve-wracking. But there's also a lot of benefits to having a hybrid opportunity, and anything we could do to both give us flexibility, but also perhaps have some hybrid opportunities in the future going forward. I think we've proven that we can, that we can both respect open meeting law and respect the public process in virtual. So I don't know that every meeting should always have to require people to get in a car or on a bicycle, but, and drive to a location to attend. I also think for people with hearing and other impairments, there may be a real benefit to having attended Zoom meetings. So just some, I will do whatever I can to support this.
Okay, thank you. Terry.
I agree, and I think I heard that public participation, I think I heard in Concord has been higher since we've done these Zoom meetings than it was when people had to get in their cars in bad weather and everything. So this is great. We're having better participation. So also being on the MMA Fiscal Policy Committee, it seems like there's pretty much unanimous agreement. This is not a unique experience in Concord. Every town wants this hybrid model. So this is really exciting, and it's just, we're just gonna have to be patient for the legislature to act. The other thing that I was thinking in terms of being patient, whether we should put something on the town website on the COVID page saying, okay, we're working on a reopening plan. We'll be back to you in a week, or start updating the web on a regular basis so that we can help people to relax and be patient.
Good, thank you. Yeah, Susan.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I like the idea, I support the legislation, and I like the idea of a hybrid. If there were, for instance, the committee could meet in person, but then the public could have access either in person or via Zoom. I just wonder, technologically, are we set up to do that, or will we be shortly in the town facilities? Because it would be just a little different, I think, than this kind of setup, because you'd have another group that's in person, and then I know that's down in the weeds, but the point was, do we need some other enhancement of the technology that already exists in the town meeting rooms in order to do this? That's all.
I don't know if you want to
Thank
touch
you.
on, so I guess, and first of all, yeah, I think, Terry, thank you for the suggestion on using, we have a COVID hotline number that we had been updating, and I think you're right. I think using that number and the town's COVID page to provide openings or updates on reopening is a good idea, and we will do that. I don't know, the trouble we have with Townhouse specifically is access to the spaces to do that work has been delayed by the project, because those spaces are storage areas right now for the renovations. I didn't know there may be other spaces where we can do that, but yes, I think between our technology that we have available through MMN, as well as our IT group, our conversion to Microsoft Teams gives us a lot of opportunities. So we are going to do an assessment of that and see what the right, like everything, we're going to have to see what the right model for us is. But we do have a number of pieces to use. I think we just have to figure out how we apply those correctly to get the greatest, not only to get the greatest amount of participation from board and committee members, but also public participation.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Matt.
So I think we've talked about the increased participation of the public, but another factor that's not directly mentioned, which I think is also significant, is that the participation rate of committee members is up. And I mean, it's probably been since 5th grade that I got a perfect participation badge, but I think my first year on the select board, I may actually achieve that. And that's not something I would have anticipated with face-to-face meetings, just with business travel and the rest. And COVID, of course, has attenuated that. But some committees even have trouble making quorum. And I do anticipate that we will have more trouble in that area potentially with the transition back to face-to-face. So I don't know how to mention that or whether it's worth mentioning, but I do think it is a factor.
Thank you. So I certainly can take these minutes and, do another redraft of this letter and capture what I've heard here from all of you. So that's very helpful. Another piece of this that Jeremy has brought to our attention, and some of us are already fielding public questions on this, has to do with the outdoor dining and alcohol license conditions. And the advice right now is that it's extended through, it's 60 days after the state of emergency is rescinded. So that takes us out to August 15th. And the advice from the alcohol board is that the individual businesses should request any extension beyond that. But here again, both the governor's office and the legislatures are aware of this and are trying to resolve this problem so that it would be extended beyond. And I don't know if you have any additional information to bring us up to date on that, Stephen, but that's the latest I'm aware of.
Yeah, and I think Jeremy, who's our license administrator, and I discussed this, and I would invite Jeremy to weigh in here. But there's, to my knowledge, in Concord, it's different for other communities, but to my knowledge, the two biggest barriers to outdoor dining have been in the past, the parking, tabulations, and the definition of the licensed premises. And the planning board, the fix, if you will, for the first one is on the warrant. And I think everyone involved in that should feel really good about being proactive, because we started all that when we didn't even know what was going to happen. And so I think that was good. We stayed ahead of that one. Jeremy and I have talked, it'll end up being quite a bit of work if each, now I don't think every licensee is going to want it, but say we have a half a dozen restaurants who want to do outdoor dining and they submit an amended licensed premises application. That's 6 checklists, 6 tip certifications, 6 public hearings. Jeremy, I don't know if you want to kind of talk any further about what will be involved in all that. So my suggestion, Jeremy, was maybe find out who wants it and do like a kind of a special meeting to handle just those. But Jeremy, you want to talk through what would be involved?
Sure. So there are a few factors at play. I mean, we obviously have the warrant article in front of town meeting that would amend the parking requirements for outdoor dining. So if that did pass, it would simplify the process a little bit because the licensees who would want to continue outdoor dining would just have to apply for the extension of licensed premises. And there's just the open question is that going to be for August 15th or is that going to be beyond? Because if there is no extension of that current deadline right now, then the ability to serve outdoors and serve alcohol outdoors would expire on August 15th, kind of right in the middle of the outdoor dining season. So in that case, we would have to have, as Stephen said, an application, a public hearing from I think 8 to 10 licensees who'd want to maybe apply for the extension of licensed premises who have had outdoor dining go quite well for them. So that would be quite a process. I mean, we'd be able to do it, but hopefully we're hoping that there'd be some extension there to give us time to kind of plan for a more sustainable model of outdoor dining longer term.
Thank you for that great summary, Jeremy. And you're the one who does all the work on these close up and personal. So thank you for that. So I think we need to, it's like a number of issues right now. They may be changing with very short turnaround in terms of what we need to accomplish, but I think we're going to keep all this on our radar and we're ready to respond as we need to. Jane.
The one question this brings to my mind is as restaurants approach a change in the outdoor dining rule, or as is likely to be the case, they start opening indoor as well. How does that change seating capacity and therefore other licenses? Because if you're operating in both venues, I know that, in previous years, in the before, it's like AD and B. So before COVID, I guess that's BC. We had, it was when we had applications to expand an outdoor space for dining, there had to be a seat change, a seating number change in order to maintain your alcohol license. What's the anticipation there?
So the bylaw change. So basically, it's a you have to have a certain number of and I'm sure Matt could answer this even more thoroughly than I can from being on the planning board. You have to have a certain number of parking spaces for the number of seats you have, off-street parking, I should add. You have to have a certain number of off-street parking spaces for the number of seats that you have and a certain number for employees. And most, if not the vast majority of restaurants in Concord are probably under that amount of seating for the that amount of off-street parking for the seats they have. And so one of the reasons why outdoor dining wasn't offered was because they didn't have the seating, the parking capacity to offer those seats. And the bylaw change exempts the outdoor seats from that calculation. Matt, did I, that's the intent of it anyway. I think that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's the idea. Yeah.
I guess I was asking about the alcohol, whether that affects it at all.
Only being licensed and insured to serve in that space. An alcohol license is for a specific area. It's usually, there's a plan attached to the license. You guys have seen these. And so I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I could just pick a random restaurant, but if their licensed premises doesn't include like the sidewalk or like an alley next to it, they can serve alcohol inside, but not outside. And what Jeremy was just saying is to change the licensed premises absent relief from the state, each one has to come in with basically a new liquor license application that shows an expanded area.
And there's also regulations impacting takeout alcohol and so forth that are part of this change. So it's all got to be woven together.
And now let me just say this. ADA requirements for ability to pass by these tables and chairs and sidewalkways, all that stuff remains in effect. It's only, there are certain thresholds that have to be cleared under every scenario. So some people may want it, but may not have the space to do it. And so that I should mention that as well. It won't be, not everyone will have the space to put outdoor tables.
Okay. All right. Yes, Terry.
Real quick, I didn't quite follow if the governor extends beyond the August 15th, and if, I think it's Article 37 passes at town meeting, then do we still have to have a special select board meeting to go through each establishment individually, or do those two votes take care of things?
So if it was extended beyond August 15th, whenever that expires, if the restaurants still want to serve alcohol outdoors, they still need to apply for licensed premises. I think the idea of extending it beyond the August 15th would be to give a little bit more time, so not having to do this, necessarily in the middle of their outdoor dining season, kind of throwing things out of whack for them, so to speak. So that would be the idea behind hopefully an extension beyond August 15th.
I think one of the things we're talking about internally is sending a message to the licensees to say, because we don't know what the state's going to do, but say, hey, if you want this, submit all of your paperwork by X date, and we'll consider all of them at a hearing on, sometime in August or whenever, and then the board would just have that as their focused meeting agenda of considering a public hearing for liquor license applications for extension of licensed premises. That's one strategy. We haven't locked into that, but that's one option if the state doesn't do something different.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other considerations that we should be thinking about that have come to the select board members' minds? Jane?
Sorry, I've just got, I guess, a host of questions. I know that service work has really been affected by the pandemic, and it was already on our radar screen as a problem for transportation and other issues to assist people who live in other towns to get to Concord to perform any one of a number of important needs within the restaurant community and others. Has that changed? I mean, how is this? Is there anything anticipated in the move forward that can capture, that can support making that community of employees more accessible?
So the transportation stuff that we were doing with the Volpe Center and making the connections and that kind of multi-town coalition, that is all, the making the connection thing is resumed. They're having meetings and working on that plan. And then I'm told that we're having a kickoff meeting, or maybe already have had a kickoff meeting with the Volpe Center to do that study that was related to the national park. So that those are just as traffic is starting again to pre-pandemic levels, that work on transportation planning is resuming as well. But again, I think there's a new normal there too, that we have to, that'll be a factor. I think we'll have to think about, commute patterns in a new way.
I do know that when the Fitchburg line schedule was released, there's more dependable every half hour going each direction. So hopefully that's going to be helpful as well in terms of the schedule. So, but if we hear additional comments from the business meetings that some of the select board members attend, that would be helpful to hear about. Any other comments or questions? No doubt we're going to have to come back to this multiple times. I'm surprised nobody said the chair's remarks, but I did want to take advantage of the moving into this topic because we were already there in our conversation. So let me back up to the chair's remarks and just a couple of quick remarks. And one is that I want to remind everybody that if you want to vote at town meeting, today is the deadline for registering to vote. If you're not already registered to vote, that office is open with extra hours today until 8 p.m. And there's also the opportunity to do it online, and the directions for that are on the website or by calling the clerk's office. The other item I'll just quickly mention is that remind everybody that on Memorial Day, obviously the select board will not be meeting at the point that the program was determined for Memorial Day to be part virtual and to have some in-person events in town, but not necessarily advertised as such. That was before we knew that May 29th was the day that the governor was opening up all kinds of restrictions on various things. So there are nonprofits as well as the town that will be doing some events throughout the day, but it is still planned to also be have that captured virtually and some other things captured virtually to remember Memorial Day. And then on June 1st, which is the Tuesday following Memorial Day, the select board will have a meeting that meets at 4 o'clock, usual time at this point. And then at our next meeting, one of the topics we intend to cover is trying to look at a proposed summer meeting schedule. So in advance of that discussion next week, if the select board members have known vacation dates between Memorial Day really and or between town meeting and Labor Day, could you please send those to Jeremy sooner rather than later? And that would help us as we're looking at the proposed summer select board meeting schedule, which is also now going to be impacted depending on some dates that either the legislature extends or doesn't. So we're going to try to at least forecast this a little bit for everyone's sake. So that was my brief chair's remarks. So I think, thank you for indulging me on taking that out of order. And now move on to the next item, which is an update on assistive technology plans for the townhouse renovation.
Linda,
I see a question, sorry.
did you want a motion to authorize the chair to send the letter to the legislative representatives about this proposed legislation?
Yes, I think that would save us some time, I think, so that's good.
Okay.
So let's do that first before we move to the next item. Go ahead.
All right. Move to authorize the chair to send a letter of support to Concord's legislative representatives for H3213 and S2104, an act updating the open meeting law to support remote participation.
Okay, and include some of the, and may we add?
Incorporating comments as noted in this meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go. Thank you.
Second, and thanks to Linda for working on this. John.
Well, and also the town manager's office. So, and thank you. There's a second. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
Okay, that's unanimous and the chair so declares. So now, Kate, thank you. Kate Hodges, our deputy town manager, is here to address the topic of an update on assistive technology plans for the townhouse renovation. So welcome, Kate. And I know you've touched on this briefly before, but thank you for coming back to do it again.
Sure, that's my pleasure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kate Hodges. I'm the deputy town manager. And I'm actually here to talk to you about just assisted listening devices townwide, but actually not specific to the townhouse necessarily. And I think the reasons for that will become evident fairly soon. But my staff and I have been meeting with members that are actually a subcommittee group of a support group that was formed at the Council on Aging for hearing and assisted listening and persons who either have or are married or caregivers for those who are hard of hearing. And so the hearing support group is what they call them. This is a subcommittee of that group. Bob Andrews is the citizen who coordinates that subgroup's efforts. And he has essentially been our point of contact for the last year. He founded the group and literally worked with COA to set that up. Pre-COVID, they used to meet in Harvey Wheeler. And that's sort of the catalyst for having to really look at the assisted listening and the hearing capabilities in the various meeting rooms and program rooms throughout town. So the group was initially formed, the subgroup rather, was initially formed to basically create a document that they were going to give both to my office as the ADA coordinator and then to the Disabilities Commission that listed specific issues that were associated with the different town facilities and public meeting rooms and the meeting capabilities therein. And the group also had some recommendations in this findings report about how we would do a better job as town officials being able to make meetings more accessible for the hearing impaired. They went off on a couple of different tangents. One was looking at the town's ADA policy and our policy relative to how we get people integrated into town meeting, how we have citizen participation and to what level we do that. And then some of it was very, very specific as to the different types of assisted listening devices. So one of the things that we did was we had a few meetings, and of course this all started in June of 2020. And so we were right in the middle of the pandemic when it was very difficult to meet in person. And so the group has their own Zoom account, and their Zoom account has closed captioning that's able to be engaged on that, and that was quite helpful. Additionally, the group finds it difficult. A lot of them are able to read lips and found it very difficult when they were meeting with people in public, even socially distanced, not only to be able to hear them, but not understanding necessarily the words that were coming out of their mouth. And so there was a variety of barriers that COVID actually brought up that were sort of a catalyst for the discussion that otherwise perhaps might not have been noted. And so we ended up working with the group over about 8 or 10 meetings, most of which were held on Zoom, but we had a couple of in-person ones over the summer. And essentially we just heard the themes of them being frustrated that they couldn't necessarily participate. Zoom is a wonderful thing for many reasons, but it's difficult if there isn't a pause between speakers. And so what generally happens in a meeting is that someone says, oh, I want to say something, and they raise their hand. And what happens is that not only can the closed captioning not catch up to that, but there's a jumble of different tones, the different tones of voices. And so what we were learning from them is when we speak, we say, this is so-and-so, whatever our name is. And then we finish and we almost count to 3 in our heads before somebody else picks up. And it's an interesting thing to do because it seems quite unnatural at first. And then it really has the ability to have people not talking over one another. And we found that by our third meeting, we had kind of gotten the hang of it, and we were able to get through business a little bit more. So that was an interesting thing. So we've met with them and the subcommittee, like I said, approximately 10 times, and we've discussed our policies, both ADA-wise and just on accessibility in general. We went over the assisted listening devices that are available. So right now we have a receiver both in the select board room and in the public hearing room, which is at the townhouse. And essentially it works through the AV system. And someone can put on this headset and they will be able to hear it through the speaker system as if they were listening to a podcast or something on their phone. The capability is good, but it isn't great if you already have a hearing aid, because of course you're putting on an assisted listening device over something that's already amplifying sound. It's something that we certainly didn't think of. It's something that I didn't have a lot of experience in. So I appreciate this group really taking the time to educate us on that. So what we have come to realize is that there's something, and if I can just share my screen for a moment, is that permitted? Jeremy or anyone?
It should be just like usual. There you go.
Okay, thank you. So essentially what we've done here is we've learned about something called the hearing induction loop. If you haven't heard of this, I had not heard of this, so this was a very educational experience for myself and the facilities team, but it essentially it works with all T-coil equipped hearing aids. My understanding from the group is that if somebody has either gotten hearing aids for the first time or upgraded hearing aids within the last several years, that this T-coil technology is essentially within all of them. But what we did when we went out was we also looked if we could purchase additional receivers. So our pilot program for this is the Harvey Wheeler Community Center large auditorium. The reasons for that, there are many, but the primary reasons for that is number one, it's used the most for large scale events. It's used the most frequently by the persons who would probably need to utilize this type of technology. And because we don't know what the landscape is going to necessarily look like, or we're not going to know people's comfort levels when we are back to whatever our new normal is, it has the ability to hold a meeting where people can have a little bit more space. And so we thought this would be a good, most bang for our buck type of thing. So we have the equipped hearing aid, you install the loop system, and that would require some upgrades to the existing AV and then a dedicated radio frequency, similar to what they have at the high school, where they have a high school radio station. So these are just kind of some ideas of how a loop works. Essentially, it would go under the carpet. So the major consideration for this type of thing in the Harvey Wheeler Auditorium, for example, is that there's carpet in there. So the carpet has to come up, the loop goes around the room, and then if we'd like, to go through if we had rows of chairs. Now, if we had this at the townhouse, we would likely do that because we almost exclusively use that for larger meetings. And so we would be able to embed it in or under the floor, or even in parts of the wall that are around where the seating areas are. We aren't going to do that in the Harvey Wheeler Center. And so what we'll have is in the corners of the room, 4 corners, we'll have an amplifier. The other way to do it in other rooms, and this would probably work best in the select board room, would be to run it through the ceiling. This works best in a drop ceiling. So if we wanted to carry this type of technology down, using Harvey Wheeler as an example again, into what is their movie room or their game room, that has a drop ceiling, we can install it right into the ceiling. And essentially, this is the technology that comes with it. It will actually connect just like a Bluetooth to someone's hearing aid, as long as it has that, or there's a separate device that they just look like small earbuds. You can either have one or you can have 2, depending on preference. And this is just sort of how the hearing system works. Certainly, I'm happy to send this to Jeremy that can send it to the group so you can take more time to go around it, but it effectively has a wired microphone that feeds sound into the amplifier. It sends a current that's a radio frequency wave, and it generates a magnetic field that's around the coil that goes around, and then the hearing device converts that to sound. It is not an inexpensive thing, and having gone through the capital plan a number of times, both with the select board and the finance committee, and then in the public hearings, you might recall that we put $50,000 in the capital plan for ADA improvements, and they were specific for this. The loop system itself is about $12,000. The wired mics, which have to be this Televic required mics, are about $6,000. The system upgrades for audio visual are $18,500. And then, of course, like I said, we need to tear up the existing carpet and replace it with another one. So the subtotal, it's about $50,000 for that. The other good news is that's the largest room. So this would be obviously in today's dollars. So these are 2021 estimates. The largest expense to do a room would be this one as it is right now, unless we're looking at any of the gymnasiums or auditoriums within the school, but we haven't done that yet. So again, we've asked for $50,000. We have about $3,900 that's left from this year's allocation of $5,000 that we had for ADA. And so once this project is complete, we'll have about $2,500 left. I think it would be important for us to really test this system in earnest, make sure that we are having multiple different types of events before spending this kind of dollars in other town buildings. But I'm fairly positive that this is quite representative of what this group had been telling us. And I think it really makes it clear that we really want to drive participation, and we're trying to do our best to make sure that that happens. But I think the process and the program will only be as good as we are advertising it. So we certainly need to do a better job of making it known that these things are available. And then I think that we also need to run periodic training so people know what we're doing. People who are setting up the room know if there's somebody that's utilizing this, what they may need to do. Do they need to speak slower? Making sure not to cover their mouths. So I think that there's an educational process as well as obviously the monetary investment.
Thank you, Kate. It's terrific news that all this work has already gone into it, and I know this is on the warrant for covering the pilot program. So that's terrific. Do you have any sense of the timing for this? Should it be approved?
Sure. So we actually went as far as we possibly could without having the funds, and so we actually contracted with a vendor off of the state bid list. So we already have all of the requirements that are under 30B for the bidding already done. So as soon as the town meeting passes the capital plan, providing that they do, and the money is in the account, we'll be able to have the town manager sign these contracts. And then it's as simple as having the facilities department, do some of the work of taking up the carpet and removing some of the side panels, and then just ordering the stuff and having it done. And then of course we have to have the carpet replaced. So it's the equipment is the easy part. It'll be the carpet removal and replacement. But if we have a feeling in July, we go through town meeting and we know it's a go, we'll start scheduling that so that we have it done by September 1st. And that aligns with when we were hoping, providing everything works out okay as far as the COVID restrictions, et cetera, that we're opening up to a more regular schedule at COA. So I think it would be good timing for that.
Terrific. Questions from the select board, and I see Matt has his hand up. Matt?
Yeah, I was just looking at that budget and seeing that, the loop system itself is pretty inexpensive in relative terms. The AV system upgrade really isn't related, is it? It's really just that the AV in that room was not world-class, let's say, as it was. But if for $18K, I assume you can get a heck of a AV upgrade. I mean, that room benefits from that, but I just putting it under this category, I don't know if that's really fundamentally what's driving it. I guess the timing's driven that way.
So it is, because the hearing loop has a mixer that goes in and out, and the mixer that is in that room is at least 15 to 18 years old. So we can't retrofit it. That's what the
Yeah.
problem is. I think that we may be able to retrofit the hearing room and the select board room because those have gone through some major renovations as far as AV within the last decade, but we haven't been successful with that. And so just, looking, I'm just reading what they have here. They need a dedicated mixer and a cabinet, and so they don't have that there. What they have is a microphone that has a small radio wave receiver that goes to 2 non-permanent speakers that are on stanchions. And that's
Right. No, I've had to deal with the AV in that room.
Backyard DJ has something similar to that. And so I don't want people to think that this is the way that we're trying to get the Harvey Wheeler to have an upgraded AV system. If we weren't going to do the hearing loop, we'd just leave it because there's nothing broken and it works. But the point is that we can't retrofit it, and it doesn't have the technological capabilities to be able to basically mix and jive with this system. So it would be effectively worthless if we didn't.
So I was thinking, looking ahead, that one of the possibilities would, of course, be the high school gymnasium, for town meeting. I mean, that's pretty critical meeting for people, and also one where I think hearing in that space could be challenging. But you wouldn't have the carpet issues. I hope that the AV system would be up to snuff, but I have no idea. I'm just trying to extrapolate here. What are we in for as we, look to accommodate this need, for more other area spaces, right? You already talked about the townhouse space, but.
Yeah. So I can tell you that we didn't specifically look at the gymnasium, but given the amount of hours that we spent with Shanahan is the name of the company, they don't recommend this in gymnasiums because the acoustics are not really right. And what they recommend in gymnasiums is exactly what the high school has, which is a nice thing, which is, and exactly what we have bid in the past, either with Boston Light and Sound or whoever other companies that do our town meeting, which is that it's a system that's integrated directly into whatever AV system is there. So we don't use the gym during town meeting. We don't use that AV system. That's really for the announcer and sports games. They bring in their own and would be providing that. I think that the place where, if in fact that this is something that people want to look at, would probably be the auditorium. There's much less echo in there. I don't know if that's necessary. They also have assisted listening devices there that we haven't received any complaints for.
Just dedicated devices.
Devices to those. I think the larger the space, the more loops you need and the more difficult it becomes. So this is really, I'm not sure it would be as successful in any room larger than the auditorium at Harvey Wheeler, but I don't use it and I'm not an expert, so.
Yeah. Well, the room that has probably the worst acoustics, in my experience, is the town hearing room. I've often been with people that complained that they couldn't hear what was going on. So that would be the second priority, I assume, if we could, do this. It's just that I do worry about the costs given that first round budget, but I'm hoping that, the carpet and the, AV upgrades might not be needed or would be a modest type of cost in other spaces that would make it approximately a third of the cost of this project for a comparable space.
Okay, thank you. And Kate, I know you mentioned it'll be important to have a period of time to assess its effectiveness at Harvey Wheeler before you then necessarily go on to other projects, just because of the cost and the effort involved to mount this in other rooms. Have you in any way thought about what that time period would be, or it may be too early for that?
We thought from about a period of 12 to 18 months, but that was assuming that we were having all different types of events that were as well attended as they were pre-COVID. And I think one of the major ones that we are concerned about / interested in seeing how it goes is the Wednesday lunches that happen there, because those are a lot of private, individual table side conversations. And so what happens when somebody is sitting at a table and they can't hear the person across from them? How does that work with the induction loop system? Or is it really just if we have one person with one microphone? And I don't think that I'm going to know the answer to that until we can have a few of those types of events.
Okay, thank you. Terry.
So my questions are similar to Matt's. And thank you, Kate and Bob Andrews and the whole subcommittee. This is exciting. This is a problem we've had for a while and good to be working on it. So just to be clear, the 51,000 that's in this article is just for the Harvey Wheeler large room. Is that correct?
Right, and it's 50,000 that's in the article, and then we had some savings from this year.
Right. Okay, so I agree. I think we have two separate problems, I think, if I've got it right, at least two. The two that I know of are people who have trouble hearing and have hearing aids and have been trying to connect in with the system. And then we have a different issue at the townhouse where nobody can hear, even if they don't wear hearing aids. So the technology that you were showing, is that to help people with hearing aids so that they can tie in their hearing aid with that loop technology?
Yes, yep, it's specific to that.
Okay, so then it seems to me at the townhouse, we need to solve both problems, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, good.
We have some ideas on that, and we need to get back in, but there's some acoustic paneling that we've priced out. So we included about 8,500 in capital outlay that we used to parcel it out per buildings, and now we just, as you know, from the capital plan, just have it together. So it's inside the levy, but we have something to look at that. The other thing that people have been very reluctant to use the microphones, and unfortunately, the microphones are the only way that we're able not only to broadcast that to people that are at home, but the current assisted listening devices only work through the microphone. So if I'm just randomly talking and I'm not talking into the microphone, or I say, well, I don't need it because I'm loud enough, type of thing, then we're not doing it. So I think there's also a training issue about telling people, you may be loud enough, but you don't have to scream into the microphone, but you need to use the microphone because that's the piece that actually delivers it to others.
Correct. However, I've also been in the hearing room where people are using the microphone and the people in the room don't hear. Only the people out in the public hear. So there's several different problems. I'm sure you're aware of all of them. And I guess my last question then is, since we're doing the whole renovation there, is there a piece of this that should be done now while they have the walls ripped out and all the construction going on?
So they only have the walls ripped out on the first floor, is the first one. And the second one is we're out of money.
Right.
So even if we wanted to, we're out. So we need to wait. That it wasn't part of the contract for that. And so I think when we go, well, it's not when, it's when it's completed, the investigation process. I assume that there'll be more discussions and you'll likely see something in the capital plan, either under townwide building maintenance or as its own standalone, depending on how the manager wants to see that. But I would imagine that we would need a different type of AV system there. And my recommendation would be that we would get one that would work through the PEG system and also includes closed captioning. So I think it's a little bit more robust and it's a bit of a different beast than than Harvey Wheeler.
If I could just comment on that too, and when we talked about this on the previous agenda item, I neglected to mention that IT has actually started working on an assessment. We had asked them to start assessing how to do hybrid meetings if that became a thing. And I think in the hearing room, especially with the acoustics and the work that needs to be done, that I would also look to try and make that a component as well. And there's a lot of, as Kate just noted, there's a lot of things that need to be done in that room, both technologically and acoustically. And so I think we need to take a pretty comprehensive approach in how we do that. And like I said, have lessons learned from Harvey Wheeler.
Any other questions from the select board? Comments? Well, Kate, we can't thank you enough for, and to Bob Andrews and all those on that committee that have worked with you. And I know that this is not a story, you're sort of at the beginning phase of this to really tackle it and test it and see what's needed. But it sounds like you've also done a great deal of thinking also about what's needed going forward in the other rooms as well. So thank you for coming back to us with this, very helpful, and we're being educated at the same time. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay. I think the next topic is the 9/11 Regional Dispatch Governance Agreement, which we talked about and were introduced to last week. I think this week we want to step back, look again at what the components of this agreement are overall, what the benefits are to the town specifically, and then answer other questions that we have going forward. And I understand there's a presentation to help us walk through that process. I also see that there are a lot of people in the audience that may want to speak to us. There will be opportunity for public comment, which we'll try to take, and I'll speak to how we're going to handle that after we've had the presentation, and the select board has an opportunity to ask some initial, make some additional comments and have their questions answered. So I'm going to turn it over to the town manager to introduce.
Sure. Yeah, I think just to build on your point, Linda, we did get a lot of great feedback. A lot of great questions were asked. And so the team from the town of Concord and the town of Acton worked with our consultant from the Collins Center, Tom Kennedy, on a set of slides. I apologize for not getting into you in advance. We did get a lot of great questions, a lot of great feedback, and we really wanted to make sure we took time to prepare a response that was thoughtful and clear. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tom Kennedy from the Collins Center to present and sort of an updated presentation based on both the work that's been done so far and also the feedback.
Okay. Well, welcome back, Mr. Kennedy.
Hey, thank you very much. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
Okay, I was just, well, I really wanted to just cover some of the highlights and really to
Tom, excuse me for interrupting you. Are you able to turn on your video?
I tried to, and it said that I couldn't. I'm going to try it again right now. It said that all right, now I'm good. So, just as an aside, I just wanted to explain a little bit about my background. Is that I was 30 years in the state police, and I retired as a lieutenant colonel and a deputy superintendent. And in the last 4 years that I was on the department, there was, I had the opportunity to oversee the development of 2 wireless 911 centers in Framingham as well as in Northampton, and 3 regional dispatch centers, primarily in Western Mass, that provide call taking and dispatching services today for some 50 communities. I am working with the Collins Center as an associate now, and that I bring those experiences. I think I've done some 18 studies for 50 communities. So it's when I get done, if you ask me any questions, I'll be more than glad to answer any questions. So some of the benefits, and it was really identified by your public safety professionals, the leaders in your town, regarding some of their operational benefits. And they identified, increased capability for surgical calls, additional personnel, opportunities for dispatcher advancement, new technology and better technology, standardized dispatch protocols, efficiencies through the economy of scale and combined resources, as well as professionalism of operations and increased expectations, as well as independent dispatch department. These are very similar to a number of the benefits that were identified that I had done in the report. I identified at that time, I had done 198 interviews in some 42 communities. The most cited benefits and these were all in Massachusetts, by police chiefs, fire chiefs, dispatch personnel, and town managers, were standardized and use of the same dispatch protocols, additional resources during major events and critical incidents, cost savings, and financial support from the state 911 department, as well as enhanced mutual aid and more effective call taking and dispatching capability. Very similar to what the chiefs and dispatch personnel identified in your community. A number of years ago, the state of New Jersey identified, they also did a study on the benefits of regional call taking and dispatching, 911 calls, and they identified that there was, from their experience, there would be improved services, clear economies of scale, improved efficiencies, as well as cost savings to the communities. The International Association of Chiefs of Police, that I was able to capture a bit of information in 2012, identified a number of benefits to the communities that regionalize, and this is from their experiences, that there were long-term cost savings, better systems and service model, an opportunity to reduce duplication and share costs, as well as improved employee retention and growth opportunities for dispatch personnel. Those are some of the operational benefits. Financial benefits is really, we were able to gather information from the finances from both Acton and Concord. For Concord, the non-recurring capital cost savings that really is derived from the list of the equipment that you currently use and the life cycle that actually is of that equipment, and then identifying those that equipment that really is outdated today, and I spread that over a 5-year period to identify the annual non-recurring savings.
Hey, Tom?
Yes.
Can you share the screen so we can all, I think you're looking at the presentation. Could you share the screen so we can all see it?
If you could get somebody to do that.
Sure. Keep going.
Sure. The recurring cost savings is really some $415,282, and it's really which really leads to the governance agreement. So very clearly there are financial benefits and operational benefits. The governance agreement, the document that was provided really came from statute law that allows for the establishment of a regional emergency communications district. They often call it a dispatch district, as well as the that has been customized to if you get out a little bit, yeah, right there, and it has been customized to Concord and Acton based upon the feedback that the both communities provided through their town managers. It is a I believe it's a strong agreement. It calls for a 5-year commitment to work together to deliver dispatch services. It also provides that if grant funds are not provided, are not awarded, that the agreement will remain in effect, but the project to regionalize does not need to move forward. Grant guidelines are very competitive, and they use a priority criteria. With an executed agreement, the submitted grant application today would be rated with a grant application, it would be rated a priority 2. Without it, it's a priority 4. So the likelihood of getting the funding without an executed agreement really reduces your competitiveness for the funding in order to do this. The state 911 they do this development grant process once a year. Usually in January, they announce the criteria, and that any new elements that are provided in that. This year, the grant was called for a March deadline, and that they will be making an award. They will be making an award in June. So it's that without the executed agreement, it becomes very difficult in order to secure the funding that would move the town forward to regionalize their dispatch. The agreement, the governance agreement, really has a layer of accountability that is really built into it. And your representative is through the town managers as well as through the police chiefs and the fire chiefs. They have there's an operations board that really oversees the development of the dispatch protocols, as well as for there is a finance advisory committee that is made up of the chief financial officer and the chief administrative officer of each community. They have so there's a number of checks and balances that are built into it that really represents your community as well as the town of Acton. There's much like all agencies that have been developed in Massachusetts, both at the state and local level. Really, they have certain criteria like open meeting law. There is, that's an element in the governance agreement, as well as in the statute law on that, as well as in there's an annual audit that the results of that audit are actually provided to each of the select boards of each town through the town manager. There's it does require an annual assessment that's developed by the operations committee. That would be the police chiefs and the fire chiefs of each community for not only for operations, but also for the equipment that's being used. There is a withdrawal. The withdrawal a community can withdraw with a written notice to the chair of the board not less than 3 years prior, unless there's been a unanimous vote of the board. In practice, the 3-year requirement would be waived for withdrawal if significant grant funds have not been expended. The termination of the membership would be effective for 30 days following the payment of all obligations, and not less than 2 years from the receipt of the notice of termination, and that no participating community shall be entitled to retain or be reimbursed for any costs or liabilities incurred prior to the effective date of the termination. Ongoing obligations like other personnel benefits would be transferred back to the withdrawing community. Participating communities shall address the impacts caused by termination by either encouraging other parties to join the district or by reducing the expenses of the district. The termination party would remain liable for its assessment in full until the end of the current fiscal year, absent mitigation. and the type of activities to be taken in the mitigation shall be determined as the sole discretion of the remaining participating communities. There is, did want to, provide the current organizational structure of both communities. Today, it is your select board, it's your town manager, it's your police and fire administration, as well as for that provides oversight onto your dispatch operations. And that's really is the same in both communities. If it was a regional center, it really is it goes to both the same with the select boards, with the town managers, the police chiefs and the fire chiefs, as well as this oversight of the dispatch operations. So that there's a number of layers that the governance agreement gives you oversight onto, both from an administrative and financial viewpoint, as well as from an operations viewpoint, from your police and fire chiefs, for oversight onto the regional dispatch district. There is a director that's hired, to oversee that as a separate agency, and that director is really appointed by the administrative board for the as directed by the governance agreement. Some of your current costs that you're actually expending, and that's the personnel costs really include salary and benefits and other government costs. Today Concord is spending $751,415 for personnel expenses. There are support expenses of $48,125 for a total of $799,549, and that they do receive some support grants of $140,000 for that is used for the support of each of your in total of a total of $140,000 for the two communities for support grants. There is support and incentive money is really the support money that you currently receive for the two communities, $140,000. For the incentive portion for a regional center is adds an additional $561,224,000 for the for the total grant funding of $701,865. There's a separate grant program that is that provides the funding for the equipment and other transition expenses for our regional centers. Now, it's often asked that, how capable is the state 911 of providing these funds, as we've seen in other programs like the Quinn bill that was not able to sustain that for many years. The state 911 department has a revenue stream that comes from the charges that everybody pays for their cell phone. We pay a monthly fee of that. I think it's $1.50 right now, and that the state 911 uses those funds for the support of the state 911 program, the 911 program, through support and incentive money, as well as regional development grants. This year, there was some $22 million that was committed to the development grants, and that pays for radio interoperability, redesigned dispatch centers, computer-aided dispatch records management, and fire alarm systems, as well as personnel and a transition award. we go to the next one. The transition award is a new element of the development grant program. It provides that the first year that you are operational, the first 3 years, I should say, it provides for a payment to the regional dispatch district for the membership of a community. And for Concord, it's $384,266 a year. That's the membership that is broken up into funding for call volume as well as your population. So, and I'll talk about that in a minute. There is for 3 years, the money that is that Concord would be paying to the regional dispatch district is going to be negated by the funds that the state 911 provides through the transition award. In the 4th year, they pay 50% of the cost of the membership into the regional dispatch district, and in the 5th year, it pays for 25%. That's over and above that incentive money that is provided in the support and incentive money for the district. There is and that really covers that 5-year period. And I really wanted to explain that a little bit more. I know that during the original presentation, when we talked about, the findings of the center, and there are so many elements of the state 911 grant program. It's very easy to is to not cover all of the elements. So that really covers the transition award. We go on to the next one. This very clearly, there's some cost benefit analysis of that we did for both Acton and Concord, that both for the non-recurring costs, the capital expenses, as well as your recurring costs, which, your annual personnel and operations costs are really quite substantial for Acton and Concord. So if we can go on to the next one. Your budget process really has it's the executive director and the operations committee. They develop and recommend to the financial advisory committee, subcommittee, and those are representatives of each of your town. Through the treasurer and the chief administrative officer. An annual budget by mid-December of each year, or the finance advisory subcommittee will recommend an annual budget to the board. The board of the regional dispatch district will set a schedule for the annual budget preparation that permits time for deliberation prior to the statutory required February 1st notice to the participating communities for their share of the cost for the fiscal year. And the annual budget shall be set forth all anticipated expenses and revenues for the following fiscal year and the contingency funds for any unanticipated operational and capital expenses. Once the budget is established, each town is assessed its share. The town managers will include the assessments in its public safety budget proposals. The assessment and the supporting documentation will be presented to the finance committee and the select board as part of its annual town budget process. Cost sharing is really using the same formula that the state 911 provides in the distribution of the incentive money and the support funds. And that's really built on your 911 call volume and that what portion of that percentage of the total is really 51.25% of that belongs to Acton, as well as 48.75% belongs to Concord. There's a population, and those will be all updated figures by the time, so if you so choose to, to move forward with this, those will be updated figures with the 2020 population, as well as the most recent year of the 911 call volume. So there's a ratio of 50% for calls, 50% of population, and you can see how Concord is in total is 46.74% of the total, which means that would be the portion that Concord would pay after the receipt of the support and incentive money that they would receive, the district would receive. The employees, all existing employees would have an opportunity to work for the district. The district is committed to negotiating a fair contract that reflects the new working conditions, as well as to maintain a very competitive benefit structures, as well as new promotional opportunities and new professional development and professional growth opportunities. Dispatches today are not like dispatches, from 20 years ago and 30 years ago. It is a profession in and of itself today. They're required to support and manage a great deal of technical services that are provided beyond picking up a phone and responding to the person at the other end. Next generation 911 really changed the dynamics that goes into a regional dispatch district or any district, any dispatch center, and as far as the way they receive information, both technically as well, and it is how they provide the response. The State 911 Department has been working towards improving that through the Next Generation 911 program that has been out for several years now. So it is a substantial benefit, for the communities with the changes that have been made, and for all of our citizens that are that require emergency services. The timeline, it really is a May 31st is the timeline that they're looking for submitting an executed agreement to the State 911 Department. And why you would want to do that is to really elevate the priority that you would be placing for your grant application. The grant application was submitted. It was really a $2.1 million grant proposal that covered all of the costs that would allow Concord to be moved into the new regional dispatch district at the Acton Police Department, actually public safety facility, that had the space in order to expand to accommodate both communities. June 30th, the State 911 Department sends the award letters to the recipients. There's a review period. If fully awarded, the project timeline calls for the transition to the REC by October 1st of 2022. If the project is not funded, the implementation of the creation of the REC will be put on pause. So I would like to answer any of your questions that you may have.
Right. First, we're going to take comments and questions. Thank you for that, Mr. Kennedy. And we're going to take comments and questions from select board members? Jane?
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. And that's a very thorough presentation. And I'm puzzled about a couple of things in the presentation. So I'll just go through my list, and if I'm being repetitive or others have, if this is something that you haven't covered yet, let me know. First and foremost, if this agreement is not signed on the 31st and is not submitted, is this an annual opportunity or is this a one-time only?
It would be an annual opportunity.
Okay.
It's it's an annual opportunity.
Okay. That was because I was looking at the difference between the ongoing cost savings and the one-time only. And I think we've talked about this previously. And my sense is from the discussion that Acton is keen to go because they have the space and they want to build it out. If Concord doesn't join Acton, will Acton be able to operate? Does Acton have another process in line?
Well, the only way they'd be able to do that is to have another community that would be willing to join them, and that and I think that there is there's two components that we talked about for benefits. One is that was the finances, and and that's why I presented it as there's two pieces that are intimately and tied together. One is the operational benefits that I've seen personally that can be quite substantial as far as how a regional center operates, and then the other is the financial piece, and then there's because of the development funds would be used to improve some of those your existing capital costs for, as an example of updating some of your radio systems and to provide some coverage into a couple of areas where there are gaps in your radio system. That would be, an additional benefit that is part of the grant process.
So that would be available to Concord, not just to Acton through as the recipient of the technology itself.
Actually, it's a Concord and Acton would be a recipient of that if they choose to regionalize their dispatch.
No, I understand, but I'm saying that's not that doesn't go along with the housing of the center. It's a broader benefit.
Yes.
We do have representatives from the town of Acton. I think if you wanted to ask the question about Acton's plans, it'd be best directed to them, Linda, if you would allow that.
I would, yeah. Who would like to answer that from Acton?
Hi, nice to see you all again. John Mangiarotti, Town of Acton. To the specific question of if Concord wasn't involved, would we join with another part of the community? That is not something that we've looked at or explored. The reason that we've decided and pursued a partnership with Concord is because of the many similarities that the two communities have and the close working relationship that we have from a public safety and administration standpoint. And we thought the opportunity was worth pursuing. We haven't built that relationship or that structure with any other town at this point. And we would certainly regroup and revisit and see what's out there. But Concord is really a perfect partner for us in this, just because of the way we operate, very similar service levels.
Mm-hmm. And Jane, I guess I thought I heard in that question about building a dispatch center. I think, John, maybe you want to clarify, you have an existing dispatch operation. What we're really talking about is a reconfiguration.
We wouldn't, yeah, we don't need the whatever number of dollars in capital funds necessary to run our operations. We'd be able to run just fine our own dispatch operations. We have 10-year capital plans that we're going to pursue, but there's no urgent need to make a major investment that we're relying on this grant for. We do have other means that we're exploring if we're making improvements over the next few years in the dispatch center.
Okay. And then I also had a question about the 3-year exit. That seems like a pretty long lead time to disband an agreement, especially when the timeframe to our award is not in our control, but then once awarded it, we're locked in for whatever, there's a 3-year lock.
I can touch on that briefly. I think one of the reasons why we highlighted the fact that the board can waive that 3-year requirement is that, and I think the slide noted this, in practice, if we're early on in the development grant process and we haven't, hired an executive director and started purchasing equipment, and we realize there are technological issues that are kind of deal breakers, then I'm confident that because we do have a good working relationship, either community would be able to exit with a unanimous vote of the board, and then we would just notify the state that we either are going to have a different partner or we are not going to move forward with the grant project. I think from an operational standpoint, I think there's been, the feasibility study spent quite a bit of time. That process spent quite a bit of time looking at the operational issues, and I don't want to speak for the chiefs, but I'm not aware of any that got identified during that process.
Operational issues that exist today or operational issues that are anticipated?
I don't know, Chief O'Connor, if you wanted to weigh in, but my understanding is that operational issues in our own dispatch?
Right.
Yeah, I don't think either. I think that it was more the opportunity to get the benefits that Tom Kennedy laid out.
And if we went forward with this and then it was, it either did not come together for any of the reasons outlined, or if it did and then we chose to exit, what do we have left? How has our system changed or not changed in a way that exists today?
Yeah, you mean if you chose and to back out like in 3 years or 2 years?
Or if we don't get the funds and we've committed a lot of time and energy into building this program, what's changed on our end? And this would be to Chief O'Connor and Chief Judge and to Stephen and to Town Manager Crane. How does it affect what exists today if either it doesn't come together in terms of the annual decisions about our own dispatch center, and then if we pulled back, what would we have internal to Concord to step into?
Well, we'd have to plan for that, but I think we in the last couple of meetings that we had, and I think Chief Judge's example of the first 10 minutes of a structure fire laid out pretty well. He articulated that better than any of my examples. That, as he said, was at the 40,000 foot level of an operation. We feel that there's a public safety benefit of having the regional center having those additional bodies. It took a number of years for us to get to 2 dispatchers on the overnight shift, which we recently did. The emergency medical dispatch. Chief Judge was a dispatcher many years ago, and he'd be the first to tell you, as Tom Kennedy mentioned, that the position has evolved over the years. It'll continue to evolve as technology continues to move forward. I had spoken at a past meeting of, at some point, hopefully being able to push video right from incidents right back to the dispatch center. And my experiences in events is to have, if you have more hands available when things go bad, the result is that you have a better initial response. And time is everything in our business.
And Chief O'Connor, I appreciate that. That wasn't really the question, though, which is we're operating today, and what I have heard Stephen say is, what we have today works fine. This is an opportunity, and that's why the presentation's being given and why we're moving forward. If for whatever reason, for some years hence, it wasn't the right idea, there was a back out, what is left in Concord? How does that affect our own ability to step back? That's all I'm asking. Not what are the benefits. I heard what you've said, and it's been described by Chief Judge and by you and by Stephen. So I'm just trying to figure out.
Well, we would have
to go back to if that's.
We'd have to plan for that. We'd have to see where we were at that time, at that time period, whenever that is that the town decided to opt out. We'd have to plan for that. I don't have an answer, a clear answer for that question, other than to say we would not go back to a place that we would not be delivering service to meet our public safety needs. We'd have to plan appropriately.
Right, and I appreciate that. I'm just thinking about the allocation of funds.
Well, the allocation of funds, I think Stephen answered a couple of times. I think Mr. Kennedy did. Is that the future grant that the town would assume costs.
Okay, Matt?
Yeah, I think following up on that, when I look at the withdrawal conditions, it says that the mitigation would be determined at the sole responsibility of the remaining towns, which would mean if Concord were to withdraw, that Acton would set the terms of withdrawal, at least as far as I understand it, if there were just the two communities in place. And I didn't see any reference in the withdrawal clauses about the issues that I raised last time. And I didn't see it in the presentation either about liabilities, and in particular, unfunded liabilities like OPEB, and what happens, if, let's say, if Acton left and the district has assumed these liabilities, how do you resolve that, at that point in time? That's one question that I have. Maybe we could check in on both of those things. First of all, is it true that the other town would dictate the terms of the withdrawal, and there don't seem to be any kind of provisions for arbitration, or I don't understand how that works. And then secondly, what happens I see there's discussion of equipment and assets, but not about the long-term liabilities of the district, funded or not.
So in terms of, one of the reasons why there's a long duration for notice for withdrawal is that it's not just one community that has made plans around providing these services through the district. It's a number of communities, and if one community exits, it changes the balance for multiple communities. And I think it's just to ensure that one community withdrawing doesn't inordinately harm another community. That's what that process is intended to accomplish. But there also are, fail safes if a faster withdrawal didn't really cause any harm, that could happen. And I think that's really it sets the framework for to establish a process and a dialogue between the communities in terms of identifying the impact and mitigating the impact of the withdrawal, because there would be an impact if the town drops out. After you've gone live and you've got employees and things like that, there would be an impact that would need to be worked out. I'll note that Acton is going to still be our neighbor, and Concord's still going to be Acton's neighbor, even if we're not in a regional dispatch. So I think that there is some, the communities work together all the time, and we would work together on that process. In terms of things like pension obligations and like retiree health or OPEB, there was a change in, I think it was the Mass Municipal Modernization Act that basically changed that to where instead of like if an employee works for 10 years for Concord and then 10 years for another town and then retires after 10 years in, say, Acton, they would then, those other two towns would get annual bills for the time that employees in those towns. My understanding is that that's been changed where the town of Acton owns that retirement of that person. The retirement contributions of the employee go with the employee to the new system. And so because this is going to be a new district, the town, if we withdrew our obligation to the retirement benefits of dispatchers, first of all, we'd have to hire our own. So then we'd be going back to paying pension and OPEB and things like that on our dispatchers. So as we sit here now, it's a 2-town rec and it's relatively the same level of human resource. It's not a new obligation. It's a transfer, as I think I mentioned last time. And so it would just transfer back as we brought dispatchers either back or brought on new dispatchers, depending on how that all played out. But that obligation,
okay, the obligation joins the district and then retires, and there's a OPEB obligation for that dispatcher. Let's say there's 3 of them. Mm-hmm. Then Concord leaves the district. Who bears the OPEB responsibility? It seems like the district does, but now Concord's not in the district.
And that would be part of the mitigation discussion. But the obligation would remain.
And there's no framework for that. It just is, it's whatever you come up with at the time. And like I say, it's the remaining community that gets to dictate those terms, right?
Yes, under the terms of the agreement.
So Acton, if Concord left, Acton would decide, well, this is how much you got to pay us to leave.
Mm-hmm. I think there are other mechanisms that are a part of that agreement that are also in play there. But that is one way it could go, sure.
Yeah, and there isn't like an arbitration or something like that. If if Acton says pay us $50 million to leave, I mean, I'm being absurd here, but I'm just saying, what do? We just have to stay in the district, cancel our withdrawal.
I can't even envision a scenario where that would happen. And I think the benefits to being in the district, to me, I guess, outweigh the risk of that type of scenario. And I also think that there is a collaboration and ongoing partnership that exists outside of the confines of regional dispatch that would remain in effect. So that's why I don't see it's like 2 private parties going to the mat for a settlement, because they don't have to deal with each other ever again. It's
like for different. Water rights or something. Like
maybe
go to the mat. Yeah.
But look at that. I mean, I think that's a perfect example of we're still working with the town of Acton on this.
Yeah, we never did come to terms until a judge gave them. So.
But we didn't stop working. We didn't stop, sending mutual aid to Acton because we were having a dispute over water rights.
Sure.
That's not how it works with towns. I mean, you know that.
Yeah. Then totally different angle on this is I'm trying to understand the effect of executing the agreement, but then if the grant funds aren't done, the agreement stays in force, though the district isn't formed. What is our situation at that point? Let's say, you were saying that there is I think it's a discretionary way that we could both walk away, but in effect, legally we're bound by that agreement. And that whole 3-year withdrawal or whatever, if both parties didn't agree, we're in it, right? And I don't know what it really means, I guess.
What that really means is we could reapply next year without having to go back and go through the, without having to go back through this process again.
Okay.
Yes, Terry?
Okay, I have some questions also. So if I understand it, the next step would be if the select board does sign this, does vote it and the town manager signs, what are the next steps? And conversely, if the select board votes no, it sounds like what maybe our option is to continue. We have the application in, but now we're priority 4, so we probably won't get the grant, but maybe we can keep working on it and fix up some details or whatever and apply again next year. So I guess I'm interested, my first question is, what are the next steps if the select board votes yes? And what are the next steps if the select board votes no?
If the select board votes yes, then, obviously the town manager signs that along with Acton town manager. And that information, that document is actually submitted to the state 911 department. And that, and actually it significantly improves the, the opportunity for receiving an award. I suspect, that you will be you will most likely receive sufficient funds in order to become operational. Part of that is that the state 911 director, and I've spoken with him, is he recognizes, in the area of Acton and Concord and surrounding areas, there really aren't many, there aren't any regional dispatch districts that have been established. Southeastern Mass is a significant number that have been recently established and that are growing up in the area, for where Acton and Concord is. And they have a great desire to make it as an efficient and effective 911 system throughout the state. So it's going to be, your grant application, is going to be received well.
Right, I don't think that was clear, I'm sorry. So if we get the grant then, what are the next steps? What are we going to be doing with the grant money, I guess is my question, if we do that.
Well, there would be a number of elements that were part of that. It had to do with the renovations at the Acton Dispatch Center, to be enlarged sufficiently to accommodate both communities. There's a number of radio improvements that must be made, as well as, some, they call them subscriber equipment, which is portables and radios. There's a fire alarm system that needs to be connected to, from Concord to Acton to the dispatch district. There's a regional computer-aided dispatch records management system that would be put in that would be new. And so that this is like a 15-month process, of being able to everything from hiring a project manager and then monthly working with all of the members, the various departments, the police department, fire department representatives, as well as the technical representatives from each of the towns. And that, so it's a lot of work over the next 15 months in order to put it into play. You know,
Okay.
like I said,
Okay, thank you, thank you. So my next question, I had questions on 2 of the slides. If we can get those back again, that would be great. It would be easier if we had them. If not, we'll try to do it without them.
Which slides, Terry?
Okay, keep going. Don't think we did that.
In which, up or down? Can you tell me what the subject was?
Okay, one of the slides was very near the beginning. Okay, okay, keep going. Keep going. They don't have numbers. Hold on, it's one of these right here. Agreement is binding. Maybe go back one. There it is, the second bullet. It says the agreement is a 5-year commitment. The agreement is binding, but the participation of the towns is not. So I didn't understand what that means.
I don't know, Tom, if you wanted to take, I mean, the communities, as we said, can opt out. There are conditions to do that, but it doesn't say that you can't opt out. I mean, that's my view of it. I don't know, Tom, if you have a different interpretation of that.
you know, I mean, generally, once an award is made on this, it's in the, once they receive the award, there is, you bring both communities together and their representatives, you know, to ensure that they want to continue moving forward with this. And that there is an opportunity at that early stage, you know, to be able to, you know, to back out without any significant changes to your existing structure. And that, you know, both, like I said, both communities would have that opportunity. And it's a, but the long term is that you really want to make that 5-year commitment, because it really changes a lot of things. The state 911 department invests, you know, several $1 million into this whole project. And that once radio systems and other, you know, emergency communication systems are in place, it's very difficult to change those around, you know, because of the substantial costs. And that, so, you know, like I said, usually in that first month, once you found out you've gotten an award, you really want to find out exactly what you're going to be spending that on. And you also want to, you know, make sure that both communities want to move forward with that. I have to say, all the ones that I've ever worked with move forward with it. It's the only time I've ever heard of I've heard it once, I think, that one community dropped out. But, you know, I know that, like in Southeastern Mass, I mentioned that there's like, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 regional dispatch districts that are in operations or in the process of being, you know, they're in a planning stage. So, you know, it covers a wide variety of communities, some very large. I mean, some are fairly large that just went operational, you know, this at the end of last year, and they're already adding communities into it. So that's their desire. So I have not seen anybody that stepped away, you know,
Okay.
early on.
I just thought that sentence was really confusing, because it sounds like once you sign, even if you wanted to back out, you've got to take 3 years to back out. I was just kind of confused by that. But anyway.
I was gonna say, I can give an example of that if you're interested. For Westcom, we had 4 communities adopt a district agreement. And we had been awarded a development grant, but we were going to need another cycle of development grant funds to really fully implement. And so at that time, we hadn't spent any money because we got our grant award, and some communities wanted to go ahead and move forward and pursue another round of development grants and kind of stick to the process and continue to develop it. So 2 communities didn't want to take that chance. And so they basically submitted letters, and the 2 communities that were, their boards voted to withdraw from the district. They submitted letters to the Westcom Board of Directors, which was myself and a representative of the city of Chicopee, and we voted to let them out because we hadn't spent any money. And we really hadn't gotten down the planning process very far. Those are the types of moments. And then, but then Westcom started operating, and I think at least one of those communities, plus 3 or 4 others, did eventually vote to join. And they, as Tom said, they continue to grow because of the way the state incentivizes regional dispatch centers. It's a good benefit, not only operationally as Chief O'Connor and Chief Judge have laid out, but also financially.
Okay. Okay. And I had a question about another slide. While you're getting that up, it has to do with the, I think you mentioned $415,000 of annual savings that Concord would get. Right. And so, first of all, I wanted to know how that number came about. And what I think it is, you can confirm if I'm right, is you compared what we're spending now with the current system versus what we would spend, which would be our assessment minus, our assessment under the new system, which is the expenses minus our share of the expenses minus the state grants. So is that about right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, then if you could go ahead further in the slides, where there's a table showing that 415,000. Keep going, I guess. There it is. Okay, so this recurring annual savings of 415, is that for the first 3 years or the first 5 years?
That's the first year.
The first 1 year. Okay.
Yes.
And then what happens in year 2 and 3?
The years 2 and 3, you would still, obviously there's some variables like, negotiating a good contract for the dispatches. But, I will say that the support and incentive money never goes down. And that, as I mentioned before, there's also in that first 3 years, the cost of being a member of the regional dispatch district. They also, through that transition award, the town actually doesn't pay that. So for 3 years, the town doesn't pay it. In the 4th year, they pay 50% of it. And in the 5th year. So the savings is really more than that what has been provided because of the transition award.
Right. This is why I got confused. So now I think I hear you saying it would be this 415,000 savings plus the amount of the transition award?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the order of magnitude of that award? Is that about like 100,000 a year or?
I think, I'll tell you, it would be, I know the first year would be like 384, 266.
Okay, so this is only part of the savings that we would realize, but this
That's right.
15 would stay indefinitely, more than 5 years. Even though the transition award would decrease and be finished in 5 years, this 415 would remain. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, interesting. Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Susan.
Hi. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. It was a very informative presentation. I have a couple questions too. Actually, others have been answered by my colleague, or asked by my colleagues. I was looking at the percentage, the way you calculate. It's 50% based on population, 50% based on 911 calls. And what I'm trying to puzzle out is, first of all, is that fixed or is that a negotiable thing?
No, that's really fixed. And the good thing is the 911 calls really is a number that you would get. The dispatch district would get from the state 911 department, and then obviously the population comes from the census data. So it's not an item that you would negotiate, nor would you want to do it as part of your cost sharing. It's really it's generated by the 911 calls that come in over the 911 lines that you can document, as well as the the population that that we've seen both communities participate as part of the the U.S. Census and the state census data.
Okay, thank you. And then going back to what you were just talking about, the 415 whatever net recurring cost savings to the town, I assume built into that is the expenses that are articulated in the agreement for an executive director and the other positions, a treasurer, whatever, if that's.
Yeah, actually, it's the executive director. The treasurer is really is a designation on the part of out of one of the communities that would be designated as the treasurer, and that most of the regional dispatch districts, they designate a community and they compensate that person for the extra time that they have to put in on the books. So the reality is for the town, it becomes just another check and balance. It's one of your one of your finance directors. So.
Okay, so if we get to be 5, 6, 7, 10, if this is a wildly popular program and there are several other towns, and then what I'm getting to is in the agreement it says the executive director and the treasurer are employees of the district. That's where I'm, and you're saying it's just
It's a designated treasurer. It's really not an additional person, because you really don't want to be, loading up on your administrative costs for running it.
Right.
But you do want to have a very competent finance director. Usually, what they do is they have one of the finance directors from one of the towns would be designated for that.
Great, thank you. And do you know how many recs there are in Massachusetts, roughly? You said they're southeast and then maybe some in the west, but.
There are, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. It's, I don't want to give you any inaccurate information. No. I think it's around 50, but I'm not positive. I mean, some are very large.
Yeah.
This I know. In the Western Mass in Franklin County, the state police runs one. There's 26 communities in one rec. There's one in Berkshire County run by the sheriff's office. It has about 23 communities. So there's a lot of communities involved. Trying to think of, there's one in Hampshire.
Yeah.
So there's.
I just wanted to get an idea. And do you have any data on communities, like Stephen mentioned that at the outset, one of the communities withdrew, or two of them, that how frequently that happens, that towns withdraw from these recs? Is it a,
to be honest, it's rare. Once a rec is established, it's very rare, and it's more likely what Stephen mentioned earlier, that communities join versus leave. Like I said, I was just working on one in Foxborough, and the town of Norwood joined an existing 4, but I know that there are a number of other communities that are joining. I have not seen any in any of those projects that actually anybody left.
thank you. And the only other point I wanted to bring up is I know that Concord, and I don't have the history on this, and Jane may have some of it, but this has been proposed a few times in the past, but I think that the stumbling block was that the public safety chiefs and the town managers were not all on the same page, were not all in favor of it, and that kind of held it up. So this situation is different in that regard. Anybody?
I mean, I'm not aware of the details of that.
No, I wasn't expecting you to be able to answer it. As someone, we're all kind of new to this.
Maybe Tom Judge.
I can comment anecdotally on that. I mean, I've been here for quite some time, and as Chief O'Connor kindly reminded me, I did start as a dispatcher. To be clear, the job that I did then was completely different than what these folks do now. It has become a profession. It has become heavily technology leveraged. So I don't want to make any mistake about it. I can't step in and do what they do because they're highly trained at what they do. The efforts in the past to regionalize, going back to the 80s, I mean, the first time I ever heard about it was in the 80s. It always fell apart at the chief level because nobody could ever agree whose town it would be in, whose building it would be in, who would be in charge of it. So it really never got beyond the chiefs. And I've seen at least 3 different efforts to try and make this happen.
And that's not the case in this.
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you.
Susan, can I just offer one more comment on that? Because I think that's true, but the other thing that's changed is the state under both the Patrick Murray administration and the Baker Polito administration have made regionalization of local dispatches a policy priority, which is why they created that cell phone surcharge to fund these programs. It's why they put forward special legislation to make it easier to form districts. And they're trying to really incentivize, and that's why they're not going to fund capital projects outside of a rec. I mean, the state has really, tipped the scales in terms of their policy decisions that have made this much more favorable for municipalities in a way that I don't think really existed even a decade ago.
Thank you.
Jane.
Couple more questions. So I was curious on a couple things. Is there a typical size of a regional dispatch center? I mean, since a number of the figures that have been quoted are based on 911 calls and population, are Concord and Acton combined the standard size? What's the population usually?
I will say it really varies. Usually it's always good to work out the details between 2 communities. In your case, Acton and Concord are very similar, in more than one way, and more than population and 911 calls. There's a great working relationship between the chiefs, fire chiefs and police chiefs, and that you have a lot of very similar aspects of both communities, and and that what I have seen is that, that once it is established, and if there is a desire to expand, there are going to be a number of communities that are going to want to join you, because, I have, watching the professionalism of the chiefs that are involved in this, in both Acton and Concord, that they'll ensure that the professionalism is going to be built into the regional center, and that you will have other communities looking to join.
And I'm not questioning the professionalism of our chiefs at all. In fact, I have great respect for those in Concord, and I'm sure I would with those in Acton if I knew them. So that really wasn't the question. I'm asking about the typical size of a regional dispatch center and how Concord fits within that standard. And then because, and also how flexible this is, because, for instance, I can envision a number of scenarios, not the least of which is the average age of the population increasing, that might have direct effect on the number of 911 calls both communities, but that in general were being recorded. I'm also curious as to where some of I would see the natural beneficiaries, if that's what we could call them, or the interested parties are. Specifically, I'm thinking about Emerson Hospital, because while obviously Emerson Hospital is not on the front lines of a fire or an emergency situation on the site, they're the recipient of many of the results of the 911 call. So I'm just curious as to whether anybody's weighed in from our regional hospital. And then well, I'll stay with that.
That is really reflected in the 911 calls that are actually being reported right now. And that, and I'm sure that there are unique things that are in virtually every facility that, in every community, if there's anything at Emerson Hospital, Tom Judge would know if there's anything really unique there.
No, if I understood the question, I don't see how a combined or a regionalized dispatch center has any kind of a impact on or to a facility like Emerson Hospital. If anything, I think it probably, going back to what I've said in the past, I think that having more hands on deck, in the critical early moments, probably makes the situation better and safer for everybody.
Well, I guess I was sort of wondering why they weren't, when I'm putting together a proposal, any of the potential supporting members, I want to collect their support. So I was just asking the question. I'm not, because again, I still haven't figured out the size issue, because some of the, I still don't have a sense of what the other regional centers are in the Commonwealth, and I don't know what the average size is and how Concord fits in that. I mean, Concord could be right in the middle. I haven't heard that answer.
Jay, I think the answer is that they vary. Dudley and Webster are two towns that are smaller than us. That's a two-town wreck. Hingham, Cohasset, Duxbury, I think there's about 5 of them down there. Now, how are those? I've never gone and added all those populations up because the formula is call volume. So the Emerson Hospital call volume is factored into the study, the call volume. Chief Judge could talk better on EMS. There's already some coordination that goes on there through Samara and the use of pro ambulance. On the radio the other day, we called for mutual aid ALS from Acton. If we had the wreck, it would have been one dispatcher turning to the other dispatcher. That kind of thing. But the size of these wrecks vary, from 2 small towns in central Massachusetts. And I think it was Terry last meeting brought up that there's like 5 wrecks or 5 dispatch PSAPs out in California. They all vary and they grow to scale.
And in that way, they sort of remind me of municipal electrics. We have different sizes across the country. And the final question I have is, if this select board voted to support this, how does that encumber our commitment of funds going forward to this? Does that, in other words, does that tell town meeting on an ongoing basis, this is a non-negotiable number? Because that's not the way Concord relates to budgets. But how's that envisioned, or how does that work in other towns?
It's the way the regional center is that, when Stephen talked about the time frame, actually, I talked about the timelines on, for the budget process. It would really follow the same process as it's going through the development stage, and you'll have a better idea as it goes along, and everybody will be getting an update on a monthly basis. That certainly by February, you're going to know at what point the rec becomes operational, depending on the funds that have been provided. And that you will, the Board of Selectmen will get a briefing. Actually, they'll get the intended budget request for that share of the regional center for that year. But that would be the first year that you'd actually be applying for the transition award. So, which actually negates the cost. But you'll have a better idea of the actual budget by next February, when the town managers and, the director, gets hired, during that process, depending on the state 911 grants, for moving forward with this.
I'm not questioning the value up front or short term, and I don't mean short term as in to minimize it. I'm looking out into the future at a point when perhaps we don't have the same commitment from the state. So I'm wondering at what point.
Sure. I mean, first of all, I believe the way it's structured right now, the surcharge that everybody pays is bringing in a substantial amount of money. And what is being done here in Massachusetts is not unique, looking towards regionalizing dispatch. As Chief O'Connor mentioned about in California, there's 5 dispatch centers, 911 centers. And it really is happening all across the country. I mentioned that one study out of Rutgers that identified, the benefits of regional dispatch. So virtually every state is going through this, and that, like I said, fortunately, the state came up with a way of being able to provide the funds that would allow for this transition into a regional center. And, with that surcharge. The surcharge is not going to be used for anything else. It can't be used for anything else. So, I don't see it changing. It's been in place for quite some time now. And, I know that State 911 is very committed to doing all of this.
So, yeah, Terry? And then,
I just have a couple of follow-up questions. So both chiefs are talking about more hands on deck and one dispatcher return to the other. But maybe you could just describe a little bit more. If you have a major event now, we have mutual aid. So what's the difference between how we function now and how we would function under the rec, under a major event? And related to that was another benefit of enhanced mutual aid. So if you could just explain these benefits a little more.
Oh, sure. The reality is that it is critical incidents in the response is really your ability to respond to that is really sometimes measured in seconds.
Right.
Chief Judge mentioned that earlier, and that the more you can shave, the time that it takes to process a call and to get the appropriate response, to it is, there's actually standards for measuring, answering a call within so many seconds and actually being able to dispatch within so many minutes. It's just everybody recognizes that. So I think that is, one of those very.
Right. So everyone agrees that response time is the real key. But what I'm trying to figure out is why the rec is going to have a much lower response time than the mutual aid system that we have now.
Well, there's going to be, there is additional personnel and, as well as an additional supervisor that is going to be at the rec that is going to provide you an additional capability of being for the dispatchers to really work together and to be able to coordinate between the two towns. It's a mutual aid really comes from, it's a people issue that you're getting people to work together on a regular basis. Both communities working together for their response because they're both participants in the regional center. And, it just is really going to enhance the capability between, for the partnership that actually is formed already between the two, Acton and Concord. So.
What do you mean by additional personnel? You're not talking about that, or the total number between Acton and Concord is that we're hiring more people. You're just talking about that there's more bodies there to answer the phone in one particular town during an incident because we've combined it. Is that what you mean?
Yes, the dispatches.
Can I jump in?
sure.
I'd just like to maybe, make it a little more scenario based. I think, the way we're operating now, we have Concord Fire and Police, and we have the 911 operators in Concord, two of them. Acton replicating almost identically what we're doing. We have an incident right now, and we have two dispatchers to handle a major incident. And that sounds like a lot, but it's, I don't think it's a lot at the initial stages of an incident. And it's more than just taking the phone calls. It's once the incident starts, it is deploying resources, monitoring the incident for the, whether it's the police or fire, the employee safety, and keeping track of what's going on. And while all of that's going, while one person is trying to do that, the other person is trying to call additional resources. If it's a fire, they're having to make individual calls to neighboring departments. And while all of this is going on, there's still other things happening in town that somebody else needs to be taking the phone calls. But in this case, when we have a fire or the police have a major law enforcement incident, the two dispatchers that are working are dedicated to that call. We still have medical emergencies coming in. and we still have, everything else going on. So having the combined resources working in the same center, I think it just magnifies their abilities. It increases what they can do. Now, you could ask, well, what if Concord and Acton both have 2 alarm fires at the same time? Well, it is statistically probably so rare that that's ever going to happen, that it's not worth discussing. But just for the sake of argument, if that happens, then we're right back where we are today. But the rest of the time, we're better off.
Thank you. That's very helpful. That was very, very helpful. My other follow-up is something that Susan asked about the treasurer. It's in section 5. And there's 2 different items, and they seem like they contradict each other. Number 3 says the board shall appoint a secretary and treasurer who may be a treasurer or other financial official of a participating community. So this is a scenario you talked about where one of our finance directors, gets a stipend, for the additional duties or whatever. And then number 4 says in that same section, the executive director, treasurer, and all other district personnel shall be employees of the district. So I would just suggest that we kind of clear up this language. So either they are an employee of the district or they're an employee of the participating community. So I don't understand the way it's written right now.
So I'll touch on that, Terry. So as Tom said, and that's my experience as well, a finance director or chief financial officer for one of the participating communities would handle the treasury duties, especially if it's a 2-town rec.
Right.
But when they handle those duties, they have a fiduciary obligation to do so on behalf of the district, not the town. And so even though there's a lot of overlap and it really is much more efficient to have one of the CFOs from the towns do that, they would essentially, and the example from my example is the finance director would use his own time. He would get a stipend, but he would use his own time. And those arrangements in Concord now where that type of thing happens. It happens in every community where the finance director will have a role on like a retirement board or working with a healthcare trust or something like that. And they provide that continuity by being both a town's finance person and also the finance person for, a regional collaborative or something like that. But they do that work on their own time.
Okay.
And their obligation is to that organization in those moments, not to the community that they are normally employed for.
Okay, so what you're saying is they would technically be an employee of both the town and in their spare time also be an employee of the district.
Yeah, and it just makes clear their responsibility to the district in doing that work.
So it's already 6:45. I think we are taking time that's necessary so that people have a thorough understanding of where we are. I'd like to follow up with a couple of questions on what's already been asked, if I may. I think they'll be brief. One has to do with what I thought Jane was trying to get at in terms of the flexibility of the proportion that is attributed to each, in this case, the 2 towns, Acton and Concord, in terms of the financial benefit, quite frankly, from the incentives. If in fact, first of all, what census year will be used, given that this has to be submitted immediately and the judgment will be in June? The award judgment will be in June. Will they be using 2010 data? Is that clear?
Yeah, no, I think the district agreement, I thought that was a reference set in the agreement. I'd have to scroll through it to see it, but of where that data comes from, I thought that was specified.
I didn't see it. I could have missed it, but I didn't see it. So that's one question. And related to that, I heard Chief O'Connor speak to the fact that call activity is reflected in not only the 9/11 calls, but also the number of calls for local attributed to each of the local districts at this point, local towns. I assume that call data going forward will be whatever data comes in by town to the district rec once it's established. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I guess, Joe, we're required to report our calls to the state 911 department currently, right? And I think and they collect that data. And then
actually, they were able to review the number of calls that come in through the systems that are actually installed in the dispatch center. So electronically, they're able to see where all of the calls came from.
So, so once this proportion is set as it is now in this agreement, that will remain static in the years to come, even if call volume differs coming from the respective communities?
The data is updated 6 months prior to the start of the next fiscal year under the terms of the agreement.
Okay, and I also want to better understand as additional communities would join this agreement, which seems to be likely in the terms that you're talking, how that affects the incentive or the cost savings and on reoccurring costs to each of the towns. I assume it would diminish as it gets spread across the new districts, new towns coming into the district agreement.
Actually, what State 911 does is that they are able to, just use it as an example, you had an additional town that joined. So their 911 call volume and their population is added to the existing total, and you separate that out by that ratio that separates the three communities, so that there's, as I did for the two communities, you broke it down into a ratio of 2 communities for their call volume and their population. You would do the same thing if there was 3. So that generally what happens is, because of economy of scale, there is the amount of money that actually a community is likely to pay is actually goes down, because the state increases their incentive and their support money.
Annually?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I really was trying to get at that, some budget considerations there. All right, at this point, I would like to open it up to the public for their comments. I'm going to ask that you raise your hand. I think you can, Jeremy, are they able to do that in the format?
Linda, can I just I just want to build one more point on Tom's about other communities. The assessment goes down. Under the terms of the agreement, there's a minimum amount. So if a smaller community came in and based on the 50-50 formula, they would come in at a very otherwise low assessment rate. There's a floor of $100,000 per community. And so if like a smaller community came in and on the 50-50 analysis, their assessment was below that, they would have to meet that $100,000 floor to make sure that the towns that have kind of contributed, so the 2 towns that are working to spend the time to develop this would get an increased benefit if that did happen.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to opening it up to the public. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask that you raise your hand, which you should be able to do on the participant bar. Jeremy, is that going to work?
Yes, it does. And we do have the first person if you're ready.
Okay.
Pamela Druitt. I'm sorry, go ahead, Linda.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, Pamela Druitt, 13 Concord Green. I appreciate all of your concern and your questions. It does seem like a no-brainer. We get an economy of scale and benefits us both financially and in the quality of the work. And it also benefits us in that we have space and resources opened up for other uses of the town that might be important too.
Okay, thank you very much.
Doing it seems really bad. It seems like this is a no-brainer.
Okay, thank you. The next person, Jeremy?
I'm not seeing any more hands raised. If you do have a public comment, you can use the raise hand feature of the bottom of your screen. I'm seeing, okay, Henry Dane, if you want to go ahead, I can see your hand.
Henry? You're on mute. Yeah, you're on mute.
There, I think, am I
We can hear you
unmuted
now.
now? I've spoken on this before and I've
Could you say your name and address, please?
Sorry, yes, thank you. Henry Dane, 58 Everett Street. I've spoken on this subject before and I submitted some materials that were with the meeting materials. I have absolutely no quarrel with the public safety departments having all the personnel that they need to do their job. The question or the problem that I have with this arrangement is the structure. And I would start with one question, if I may, before I go any further. Can Mr. Kennedy give us an estimate of what the odds are that we would get such a grant? He said that now, if we submit an agreement, we are number 2, and if we don't, we're number 4. In either case, what are the odds? Are there 1 in 100, 50-50, 10%? Can you have any idea of what the odds are in either case?
No, I would say, if I was a betting man, Henry, I would say that if you were a 2 and that you would be a 90% to receive 75% of the money that was requested.
Okay.
That would be my estimate.
All right. So it's a realistic hope that we would get funded. So then it's what I'm concerned about is the administrative function structure. And that is, I don't think we have any other town entity or activity in which the board of directors is not appointed by or cannot be or the board of directors cannot be appointed or changed by the select board. When we adopt this agreement, it is dictated who is on the board of directors. And presumably if more towns joined, their town manager would also then be a member of the board of directors. While there are committees like an operations committee and a finance committee, their role, and they would have the chiefs on them, and they would have some town officials on them, but their role is designated as strictly advisory. All employees are hired, fired, compensated at the discretion of the board of directors, subject to advice that the board of directors has no obligation to follow. Finally, once the assessments are made, the town has no choice but to pay. And we might say, well, this is all a friendly deal with our friends in Acton, and I'm sure that we will still be friendly with our friends in Acton. But, when Weston or Wayland or Lincoln or Carlisle join, everybody may not be friends anymore, and also personnel changes, but we're still stuck with the same system. And we are stuck with a bill that we have to pay that doesn't even require appropriation by the town meeting. There's nothing else that we do that's anything like that. We have a school district. We still have to appropriate the funds that they have in their budget. And the same goes with all the other entities that are semi-governmental or municipal type of joint enterprises. So I think that even if this is a good idea, which it may be, the details of the details of the administrative structure, I think, are not acceptable in our form of town government. And I would add, they could probably be easily changed. But with the current agreement, there has been no discussion of making any changes to any of the terms of the agreement we're presented with a week before the deadline, as we were presented with the proposal again, I think a week or 2 weeks before the deadline for submitting the grant proposal. These are things that have been brought up against tight deadlines with a great many administrative details that really need to be considered before we just vote because we feel that our public safety departments need more assistance to handle their jobs effectively. And it would be, as I pointed out in my materials, it would be faster, cheaper, and more efficient to just hire another couple of people to work as dispatchers in our own department. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your comments. Next comment, Luis Suarez.
Lois Suarez, 34 Everett Street.
Sorry, Lois.
It's okay. How will direct calls to dispatch, like the alarms and the medical calls devices, be handled? And will those calls be counted as 911 calls? And then part of that is also, will the individuals or companies that have these types of, automatic services, will they have to do an update or an upgrade to keep their connection?
Okay, I'm going to take all the public comments and then we'll ask people to answer these questions.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Thanks, Linda.
Any other comments or questions from the public? Raise your hand if you have no other way of getting our attention. All right, I'm going to ask people on the team to answer the comments and questions before us. And one has to do with the structure and not having the opportunity to change some sections in the agreement this close to the deadline for the application. And the second one had to do with how the additional medical calls and other calls that were talked about impact the agreement.
So Linda, I can touch on the structure and then I'll defer to the chiefs on the calls. So the short of it is that under our form of government, the town manager currently has the overall, the overall responsibility for supervision of the public safety functions, including dispatch. That would not change under this arrangement, as those two slides showed with the organizational charts. The lines of authority are exactly the same, and because the select board appoints the town manager, that is in fact the appointment of the representative to the board of directors. The fact that it's the town manager by agreement is just an extension of the existing role and responsibility of the town manager.
Would anyone else like to comment on that? Okay. And the next question, I think, had to do with the openness to any changes in the agreement, given we're so close in the time to do that, given we're so close to the deadline.
I mean, the agreement can be changed at any time. As Tom noted, this is a standardized, relatively standard structure that the state is prescribed, is derived largely from state statute. But it can be modified, over time. And honestly, as we get going, I'm sure it's likely to be modified just to reflect what we learn as we go.
However, the difference would be, if I understand correctly, that the Board of Directors would be making the modification, not subject to modification prior to it being submitted.
I mean, I guess, I mean, if there was changes that were specific that wanted to be made, we could certainly entertain those. But again, I think if it's if it was changes regarding, you know, the operations, those would still be in the purview of the town managers.
And then moving on to Los Suarez, questions?
I can field part of them. So I believe one of the questions was, will all emergency calls be counted as 911 calls? Did I understand that correctly?
Well, particularly, I don't know how you count the direct calls that come like as alarms. And the ones like from the medical, you know, people have medical devices, their neck or whatever.
Sure.
I live at Everett Gardens, so, you know, we know you guys. Thank you.
Yep.
Do a lot of nice, and we joke about them here. We call them the toast alarms because you don't have to burn the toast and the alarms go off. So some of them are false.
So how they're totaled?
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
Yeah,
because that costs you how it's totaled.
Right. When we report at the end of the year on our run volume, we don't differentiate or back out calls that came in via 911 versus a business call versus an alarm company calling in. If we responded to 3,900 calls in the previous year, that's what we report on, and we don't make an attempt to. You know, I think when we talk about 911 calls, it's somewhat of a generic term. It's basically emergency calls for service.
Okay, I didn't understand it. Thank you so much.
And then the second part of your question, I think, was if anybody has equipment or how it reports to us, will they have to purchase new equipment? Speaking for the fire department, I can tell you that we have in Everett Gardens as an example, they have a master box system, which is tied to the fire alarm.
Right.
And that reports to us directly. And the answer is no, there's not going to have to be any additional investment, you know, any receiving equipment or any technology that's needed is going to be part of the process.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from the select board? I don't see any further comments from the public. Okay. Are we feeling ready to take a vote? Okay. I would entertain a motion then.
Move to support the Town of Concord and the Town of Acton Regional Dispatch Governance Agreement as presented on May 24th, 2021.
Okay, do I hear a second? Any further discussion? All right, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss, you're muted, Jane.
Nay.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
Okay, and that is a vote of 4-1. And the chair so declares, 4 affirmative and 1 opposed. All right, thank you, everyone. And thank you all who are here to participate in this conversation today. And we will hope for a positive outcome from this. Okay, the next item on the agenda is review the select board warrant article narratives assignment list. I just thank you, everyone who submitted your narratives. We're just standardizing the title for each of these as they get submitted. I just wanted to one more time ask if there were any additional ones that you thought of that we needed to include. All right, thank you. The next item is applications for new tour guide licenses. And I see Victor Curran is here to speak to this. And Jeremy, did you need to introduce it? And thank you for being so patient while we dealt with our other select board business today.
Sure. I think Victor can just go right ahead. Victor, if you just want to talk about tour guide applications.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Jeremy. This was the first year that the entire history guide class has been taught on Zoom, and I think everyone has adapted very well to the realities of the situation, and we're all very happy. I'm certainly very happy to see that now that tourism is beginning to pick up again. I know we've had a number of people from the class that were logged on tonight. I think maybe some had other time commitments and had to log off, but I see let's see, Carol and Lois and Jim are still with us, so I congratulate you. It's a great town to teach history in. A lot happened here, but what we look at in this course is to look beyond what happened to why it happened and to who participated in the various things that happened. And we've had a great group of people that really engaged with that way of looking at Concord's stories. And I am happy to welcome them to the ranks of Concord tour guides. So Jim Nager, wave your hands there, Jim, or wave your hat or whatever. And Lois Suarez, who we heard from before, and Carol Parker is here somewhere. There's Carol. So congratulations.
All right, well, thank you very much. And thank you for everyone who's taken interest in taking this course. And we look forward to you applying your new knowledge as you interact with the town going forwards. So I'm going to town manager? Yes.
I didn't get to my town manager's report, but we just did receive a regional grant with Lexington and Arlington to do an economic study of the impact of tourism. And so the folks here on our screen are going to, I think, play a big role in both that assessment and that economic recovery. So I agree. Thank you for doing this.
Very good. So I would entertain a motion to make these people official.
All right. Move to approve the applications for new tour guide licenses valid through December 31st, 2021, as included in the meeting materials dated May 24, 2021.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. And will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
And that's unanimous in the chair. So declares. So congratulations, everyone. And thank you for leading this course.
At this point, I would, if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, I would go with the new guides over to the Colonial Inn, and we would drink a toast to their success. But I'll have to do that here. Congratulations.
Congratulations. All right, thank you. I think we're ready now for the committee nominations.
Nominations: Thomas Swain of 28 Central Street to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term to expire April 30th, 2024. Elizabeth Akers Moore of 86 Holdenwood Road to a second term on the Zoning Board of Appeals to expire on April 30th, 2024. Andrew Boardman of 110 Hillcrest Road to the Planning Board for a term to expire April 30th, 2026. Josh Galper of 65 Stone Root Lane to the White Pond Advisory Committee for a term to expire on April 30th, 2024.
Okay, and moving on to town manager appointments.
Move to approve the town manager appointment of Gary Kleiman of 57 Central Street to the Natural Resources Commission for a term to expire on April 30th, 2024.
And that's a town manager appointment with select board approval. So is there a motion?
Oh, that was the motion.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
Okay, and that's unanimous, and the chair so declares. Unless, I'm going to ask in terms of committee liaison reports, unless there is something that is critical to report out before our next Tuesday meeting, I'd like to defer these to the next meeting. Does anyone have something that's time sensitive here?
Just that the middle school building committee is going to have an additional meeting next week to tie off on the feasibility phase by describing the final space summary and the expected budget that generates.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else that has something that's critical?
And the ZBA had a 7-minute meeting, which was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, okay. So I think we'll move on from committee liaison reports then to miscellaneous correspondence. There is none that is not already noted in the packet that was sent to all of us. And any additional public comment? Lois Suarez?
Yeah, I noticed that.
Just state your name and address again, please.
Oh, Lois Suarez, 34 Everett Street.
Thank you.
I noticed that our tour guide license just goes till December 2021. Is that what you actually meant? The end of this chronological year?
That's a good question, and I'll just say that it's a good question. The select board just a couple meetings ago did change the expiration date till then, so for an annual basis, because that date is going to make more sense annually. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. It's covered. It's covered at this point.
So then
it was a good.
What do we do at the end of December?
The select board will your names will be put forward again for renewal.
Do we have to apply again?
Jeremy?
Yeah, Lois, so I'm going to send out a renewal for all the licenses in October. So there'll be plenty of time then.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Lois. Okay, yes, Henry Dane.
One more thing before you adjourn.
Sorry, Henry, if you'll just repeat for the sake of...
Henry Dane, 58 Everett Street. One more thing before you adjourn, which you can still correct before the final adjournment of this meeting, is that the statute, chapter 6A, section 18Q, has specific language that must be followed in the vote of the board to authorize the agreement.
Yep, thank you. You're absolutely right. I did pull that up.
And so I think you can move again that language and fill in the blanks and vote it so you'll have a proper vote to authorize the agreement to go forward.
Yeah. Tell me the section number again, because I've got the section.
It is section 18Q, and it starts out, shall a municipality accept, et cetera.
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you for that. I'm going to ask that we rescind the vote that we took on the 9/11 Regional Dispatch Governance Agreement. Is there a second for that motion? Yeah, is there a second for that motion?
Yes.
Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
That's unanimous and the chair so declares. And the new motion, let's see here if I can. It reads, shall the, and this, we can get this text to you later. The vote format reads, shall the municipality accept the provisions of sections 18O to 18V inclusive of chapter 6A of the general laws providing for the establishment of a regional 9/11 emergency communication district together with the town of Acton, and the construction or siting, administration, operation, and maintenance of a regional 9/11 emergency communication center by the district under the provisions of the proposed district agreement filed with the Board of Selectmen of, I assume, of Concord and Acton. Do I hear a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Can we just have a quick discussion?
Yes.
I'm just curious, why didn't we have the motion in that form, and why haven't the presentations that we've had reference these provisions? I don't even know what I'm voting on, in that statute. I mean, I know that we have an agreement and we were going to vote on that agreement, but now we're voting on a bunch of clauses in state law that we have not been briefed on.
I agree.
No, if you look at the header of the district agreement, the draft district agreement, this MGL 6A sections 180 to 18O to 18V are the state statutes that authorize the establishments of the district under the process we're following. And they did have specific language. To be honest with you, we were focused on trying to be responsive to the other details, and so that I think we just missed the call on the specific statutory language for the motion. But it's the same. It just invokes the statutes that authorize the districts, because it is a specific law that does this, and it's referenced at the top of the agreement.
So I'm going to read this one more time and see if that is helpful. Shall the municipality accept the provisions of section 18O to 18V inclusive of chapter 6A of the general laws providing for the establishment of a regional 9/11 emergency communication district together with the town of Acton, and the construction or siting, administration, operation, and maintenance of a regional 9/11 emergency communication center by the district under the provisions of the proposed district agreement filed with the Board of Select Board in Concord and Acton.
Second.
Okay, I think we already had a second.
Yeah.
I just wanted, for the benefit of everyone, to read that. Okay. Any other comments or conversation about this discussion? If not, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Nay.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Nay.
and myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
Okay, that's 3 affirmative and 2 opposed, and the chair so declares. So the motion passes. But I do appreciate the votes that just came in. Well, all right. I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Okay,
Second.
will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
myself, Ms. Bates. Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. It's been a long but good discussion in this meeting. Thank you.